Today in our gospel, however simple, we see the immense power of Jesus as God himself. It's so quick, and it happens more than once, but it's so quick in these gospel passages that I think we have a tendency to pass right over it. It says the man had an unclean spirit, but when the spirit itself speaks, it refers to itself in the plural. Meaning it's not just one unclean spirit, but potentially many unclean spirits. In another passage, it's up to 1,000 of them, a legion. And yet, in this one very brief statement, quiet, come out of him, at the command of Christ, they are rendered completely powerless and have to depart. Now, to understand the significance of this power, we need to understand that the world at this point was overrun with the demonic for millennia. From the moment that we let the devil and the legions of hell in at the Garden of Eden, they subsequently had supreme power over us. They had a death grip on humanity, if you will, possessing and influencing us in all sorts of diabolical ways. And as a matter of fact, we see that resurgence once again in our time. Were there types of exorcisms? It seems there must have been in some form, as Jesus refers at another point in the gospel of the Jews being able to drive out demons. Was it successful? We can conclude it was certainly not as powerful as what Jesus does in our gospel today. Namely, at his very word, the demons are rendered completely powerless. Hence, everyone present at that moment acknowledges that this is a man with some new authority. An authority that no one apparently had ever seen in the history of Israel, and as an extension in the history of the world. This authority, everyone, is so powerful that it had never been manifested before, and therefore it only can belong to God himself. Which at this point, Jesus is not, as the demons say, the Holy One of God, but he is God. Now, the interesting part about this is as many times as he does this, the demons, although acknowledging that he is from God, cannot seem to figure out that he is God. And so throughout his ministry, all the way to his death on the cross, Jesus remains a mystery to the devil and the fallen angels. I've often thought that it must have been the greatest surprise in all of their existence, and for that matter, terror, when Jesus died on the cross. Descending from the cross was not the chosen one or the Holy One, but rather it was the second person of the divine Trinity. It was God himself that conquered them, even though they had thought they had killed the final prophet. In doing so, they themselves were defeated. So that's the history of it. How does it pertain to us? The good news is that this authority over the demonic exists in our present day and age, and we still have access to it. Massive, unfettered access to it. And this access and the unleashing of this power exists on various levels. Starting from the greatest and working our way down, in the following ways the church possesses this power. First and foremost, above all else, the power is in the sacraments. Now, we are so used to having Christ's life and power in the sacraments, most people sideline this as uninteresting. It's really rather sad. Tell me about exorcisms, they say. That's what I want to hear about. The devil, not God. Wow me. Isn't it interesting how we find talk about evil much more entertaining than talk about God? Friends, baptism is more powerful than any exorcism that one could have. One does not even need an exorcism if you can get them to make a good, valid confession. Baptism drives the devil right out of the child's life. As a matter of fact, there's an exorcism within the baptism itself. And if a possessed person could make a confession, which most of the time they cannot, that would be sufficient enough to drive the devil right out of their life. Not to mention the Holy Eucharist, which is Christ himself. Talk to the adorers here at Daily Adoration, and they'll tell you the amount of times that presumably some crazy, but most likely some possessed person comes in here and falls down to their knees, screaming at the monstrance. The devil is terrified of the Lord in the sacraments because the demon knows that he's there. It's what amazes me. The legions of hell believe in this church and the sacraments, and Catholics do not. Explain that one. Second to the sacraments, there's the avoidance of sin and cultivating a good and holy life. Again, how boring can Father get this Sunday? It is sin that is the gateway to the demon into your life. We should be more afraid of temptation and sin than demonic possession. We should be more afraid of temptation and sin than all of hell. As long as you remain in the state of grace, he cannot touch you. That is why temptation is his primary entrance into the soul. And although sin is detrimental, there are certain things that the exorcists tell us within the capacity of sin that are way more dangerous than everything else. They are as follows. Clearly, the occult. Now, when we think of the occult, we think of, the 1970s The Exorcist, or shows like it. I'm going to tell you what the real occult is, because these people hide under the guise of New Age energies and spirits and a bunch of other garbage. Just this last year, there was an article in the Minot Daily about a lady who has opened a shop, I believe in the downtown, that sells Wiccan products. Now, she calls herself a green witch. That is the occult. Wiccans worship the devil. New Age spirituality. The book The Secret, A Course on Miracles, dealing with vibrations and energy, is the occult. Completely written by demons. And don't even get me started with the occult's influence in our law. You've heard it say it before, I'll say it again. Abortion is child sacrifice. The devil salivates over it because it's worshiping him. Tarot cards, Ouija boards. Isn't it funny how something in the little kid's aisle, made by Fisher-Price, is a tool of the devil. A priest friend of mine, we'll just say in the United States, got a call one night from a Protestant pastor. Said his daughter had been at this party in which they were playing with a Ouija board. Suddenly she went stiff as a board, started salivating and foaming at the mouth, and when they opened her mouth, there was all these little bitty hooks that were pouring out of her mouth. She stood straight up, walked up the wall, across the ceiling, and down, and nobody could move her. So they called her dad, who was a Lutheran minister, came over, tried to pray over her. Her head flicked to the side, and she began to laugh mockingly at him. At that point, he called the only priest that he knew. Subsequently, she had to go through a whole array of exorcisms for deliverance. The Ouija board is real. Make sure your children are not exposed to it. Palm reading, future telling, mediums and the like, all demonic. Pornography. An exorcist friend of mine says that the devil in exorcisms has revealed that pornography is his most favorite way into the male soul. Drugs, consecrated by the cartel to the devil to get him across the border, many times with human sacrifice. When you ingest it, you ingest the curse and the consecration. Any type of magic, white or black, and most especially belonging to the Masons. If anyone in your family line has ever been a high-ranking Freemason, your whole family, from that person down, is subject to the curses and the promises that they have taken to the devil himself. If you have been involved in any of these things, repent and confess them. The power of confession can break that bond with any of these sins. But these sins have the power to create 3 levels of demonic influence in your life. The first is full-out possession. It's very rare. Sometimes people in the occult will offer up their children to the devil, and that's how they become possessed. Sometimes they will willfully ask that the devil become a part of their life, or as we have just mentioned, they will enter into some demonic practice in which they open their soul to the infestation of the spirit. The other 3 are a little bit more common and unknown. Oppression. This is where someone puts a curse on you. Voodoo, all of these types of things. But again, getting back to the Masonic Lodge, fathers and grandfathers involved in this stuff can take the entire promise of what they're saying down upon their family line. And so 2 generations later, people don't know why these things are happening to them, because the curse is still in place. Obsession. The evil one reaches in with that demonic hook through drugs and pornography, and they can't figure out why they can't get off them. Why can't I stop getting off the internet? Because he's got a hold on you. Yes, there are physical, chemical realities that go along with it, but remember, everyone, your body is a physical manifestation of your spirit. So it is a spiritual, physical relationship. They go hand in hand. That's why working with a psychologist or a counselor and a priest is your best bet for freedom. And finally, there's infestation. So prior to you moving into an apartment or a trailer or a home, the people there before you were engaged in demonic practices of one sort or another, and those spirits are still in the house. So how do we get them out? Well, first we must understand that the Catholic Church possesses this power which it received directly from Jesus himself. We are the only church that possesses this power. You want to prove that this is the real, established, foundational, original church that Christ founded? That's one of them. And the bishop of the diocese is the primary exorcist, but he usually delegates this power to a priest he designates as the exorcist of the diocese, which for the most part, these men are unknown. The devil works in the shadows, and so does his adversary, the priest exorcist. Other priests, lay people especially, do not have this power. And it would be incredibly dangerous to attempt anything in this area. If you want to know something about the spiritual world, it is about obedience and hierarchical rank and power. May not matter to us, but it matters there. The other three, oppression, obsession, and infestations, can be handled with minor exorcisms done by an ordained priest. There are also deliverance prayers which anybody can pray, like St. Michael the Archangel. Parents, as your children are going to bed at night, you should pray that prayer as a couple, from your bedroom over your whole house, especially dads. You carry the title of God the Father himself with his tremendous authority over your families in the spiritual realm. Invoke Michael the Archangel to come and protect your family, and he will be there without delay. Finally, there are sacramentals such as holy water, to have in all of the rooms in your home, little bottles of holy water, free holy water off to the side here. As I have mentioned, the sacraments themselves, frequent reception of the sacraments. Sunday Mass, regular confession every 2 weeks to a month. That's why it has been so freakishly dangerous with this whole lockdown. When people aren't going to Mass, which is the power of Christ in the world in the Holy Eucharist, the influence of grace in the church is undermined. And just in case anyone may not believe that all this is real and not happening daily in our present day and age, I will leave you with this story. When I was in seminary, being that I had gone to school to be a nurse, I had already done all the hospital stuff, and so I didn't need to do that. And so they said, well, what would you like to do? I said, you know what, I'd really like to work in a prison. I always said growing up, I'd never do anything to get myself sent to prison. Then I joined the seminary. Ended up in prison. And it wasn't just any prison. This is this maximum security federal penitentiary. I remember walking through the doors as they buzzed, these huge, massive doors, and then the big gated communities and being whistled at. And I worked with this Protestant sort of self-proclaimed pastor who was a very holy man. And he had this anointing in the Spirit when I worked with him, just where he could heal people. Deeply respected him. Huge man. He was the right tackle for Ohio State at one point in time. And he said several years before this, we got talking about the devil, and he said, I didn't really believe in all that demonic possession and stuff that Catholics do until I saw it. And I said, oh yeah, what happened? He said, well, I got a call one day, and he said what was going on was this series of murders in the area. And they had an occult sort of tendency to them. They were children that had been seemingly offered up in some kind of occult ceremony. Well, they finally caught up to the person that did it, was doing it, and it was this man who was the high priest of the satanic cult of this area, clearly possessed by the devil. And so he said, the exorcist called me and he said, we're bringing him down. This man is not crazy. This man is possessed by Legion. He said, okay. So he got there, and the exorcist said, in order for us to do the exorcism, we need about 30 days of preparation. There's a whole team involved in this stuff. And he said, so I want you to pray with this man daily. So the gentleman I was working with said this man was just a giant. And trust me, I guess everybody's a giant compared to me, but this guy was huge. Said he had long dreadlocks. And he said he was praying with him one day and he was chained to the chair. The gentleman was in one chair and this man was in the other. He was calling out to Jesus for deliverance, and all of a sudden he took the cuffs and he was like, boom! Completely liberated himself. And he went down on one knee and he said, I want to kill you! And he said, well, what's stopping you? He said, Jesus has created an abyss between you and I that I cannot pass. He said 30 days went by, the exorcist team showed up, and the exorcism began. He said it took 3 hours. Lights on, lights off, him speaking in every language he could think of, screaming, howling, urinated himself. He said at the end of it, he was sitting there praying, calling out to Jesus, and he felt a little tap on his shoe. He said he looked down, a man was covered in his own vomit. Tears were streaming out of his eyes. And he said, thank you. Became a Catholic. He's in prison, but he's been saved ever since. You want to know the mercy and the power of God? That's it right there. As we come to receive Jesus in Holy Communion today, ask for your protection and his protection over your family. We are living in one of the most demonic times of the entire world. But more than anything, pray that each and every one of us may remain in the state of grace and leave sin behind. Striving to live a holy life and faithfully practicing our faith. This is no joke. It's real. There is a real spiritual war going on right now in this world, and it's for your soul and the souls of those that you love. Both the devil and Jesus want your souls for all eternity. But it is you who get to decide where you will go and who you will serve. Choose wisely, because your decision will be forever.